use of 4 candles during Advent is a long-standing tradition adopted by the Christian community, a tradition that may well go back to the Middle Ages and can become part of our spiritual preparation for Christmas, either at home or within the faith community. I have been asked to help us reflect on the first candle, hope, a way of thinking, a state of being which seems to be in short supply in our world today. We start with hope and end with love on Advent 4, which, incidentally, this year falls on December 24th, the very night many of us gather to celebrate the feast of Christmas. Of course, the birth of Christ, the incarnation, is the very last word in love. The Advent season is a holy beginning to a sacred story that continues to get better and better as the story progresses and provides fresh insights into our faith if we are able to hear and practice these truths in new, fresh, creative ways each year. When the candle is lit on Advent 1, and when I think of this beginning of Advent, I am transported back in time to my early beginnings. When I was a young boy, Christmas was my favorite time of the year. And before I had ever heard of the word Advent, let alone that it was a season, the month leading up to Christmas was simply a painfully long, slow wait in the cold, dark months of December. I did my best to wait patiently for the light of Christmas, but alas, my hope had more to do with what lay under the well-lit Christmas tree than the birth of the Christ child, the light of the world. I am pretty certain that as a child, of all the months of the year, my behavior, my manners, my outlook was by far the best in the month of December. If I could keep this up for a month, there were rewards come Christmas. I have since learned that this wait time was grounded in hope, even if this hope was a pale, faint kind of hope based more on my selfish desire to get presents than something extraordinary might be found with my name on it under our wonderfully decorated Christmas tree. As I have grown in faith, I have come to see that this early, feeble attempt at hope was the best I could do, and it was my beginning, my first steps on the way that would later lead me, with help, to deepen that hope. I expect this realization helps me to be a bit less critical of the present generation, and I hope made me more forgiving of our children when they were young. As I got older and my early faint hope began to mature, I came to see Advent, a season which led to Christmas, in a different light. Discovering presents under the tree still got my attention and continued to excite and fascinate me, but I started to experience gifts of another sort. I began slowly to notice just how fortunate I was not only to get presents at Christmas, but that I was part of a family who actually liked me. Well, mostly. A community that thought I was okay, goofy at times, but tolerable. And people in the larger community thought maybe this kid might amount to something after all. Put simply, I was loved, and that felt pretty darn good. I began to feel more hopeful. I started to realize that being loved made me more hopeful. But there was something else about the Advent and the Christmas season that moved me and continues to speak to the depths of my soul. The sacred stories of this season helped inform my shaky, hesitant early faith. But oh, the wonder of the season, that is what captured and captivated my imagination profoundly, and it still does. The lights, the music, the singing of carols, the pageantry. I think it was here that I had my first taste of awe, which has led to my passion for the arts. Perhaps this sense of wonder is where you began that journey of faith, where you started to hope. You never quite forget that experience. I also realized that while I was becoming more hopeful, I noticed that some of my friends, folks in the congregation and in the community, well, some just could not find a way to hope. Later on in life, I encountered people who simply had no hope, or if once they had it, something had happened to put an end to that notion. A death, a hurt, a failure, a loss, a betrayal, a disappointment. While I was feeling better about being me, I was uneasy because for some, hope was simply out of the question. That uneasiness has always been just below the surface of my deeper sense of faith. I have been pondering this dilemma over the last little while. Could there be something within the Advent message of hope which might address my uneasiness? During Advent, we begin to prepare to hear the Jesus story by expecting, awaking, getting ready, so that we might hear it as if for the first time. But of course, we have heard the story before. The telling of our sacred story wrapped up this past Sunday. I would like to conclude my reflection on hope, the hope of Advent, the season which opens the Christian story, the first season, by taking a closer look at the way the story ends. I think the Book of Common Prayer might help us better understand this beginning and ending theme. You see, the yearly readings conclude in the BCP not on the last Sunday after Trinity, but on the Sunday next before Advent. I just love that phrase. This phrase, it seems, is a gentle poke, a subtle reminder that you simply cannot end the story without looking ahead to glimpse another new beginning. The collect is majestic. Stir up, we beseech thee, the wills of thy faithful people. Stir up. In the 19th century, this Sunday before Advent was called Stir Up Sunday. It was the time when you stirred up the ingredients in the Christmas pudding. Stirring the pudding, yes. But it doesn't quite hit the mark for me. Stirring up. At home, we have a fireplace and a cook stove. We burn wood, and wood ends up as ashes. Stirring up the ashes. Yes. Advent, as we move towards it, is simply stirring up the ashes of the end of the story. Ashes. Emily Dickinson, 19th century poet, had a wonderful phrase. She said this: ashes denote that fire was. John Dominic Crossan, a favorite theologian of mine, adds a little bit of hope to that statement. he writes, "Ashes denote that fire was, and if fire ever was, fire can be again." In the lectionary, at the end of year A, we read the gospel from the 25th chapter of Matthew, which makes abundantly clear that this good news, which begins in our hopeful waiting for the holy birth, must find completion in loving all those who are born into God's world. The story is an urgent call to love. As I was reading over this passage through the lens of the Advent message, I saw, as if for the first time, what I believe happens when a hungry man is fed, a thirsty woman is given drink, a stranger is welcomed, a naked child is clothed, a sick person is cared for, a prisoner is visited. There are many ways for us today to put this ministry into action, such as when we support the food bank, when we invite the hungry to sit down to a meal in our community, when clothing is distributed to families who have so little, when those who are sick in body, mind, or spirit are helped on a path to healing, when those who are imprisoned by habit, incarceration, or poverty, when newcomers to our communities are offered friendship. Not only is Christ served by our loving efforts, I have come to believe that those who are noticed, healed, fed, clothed, and visited, that each one of those persons receives another gift because of our love. Our hope is at the beginning of the Advent story, and it leads surely to love. The end of the Christ story reminds the disciple that loving is the surest, best way of kindling the gift, that precious gift of hope. As followers of Christ, you and I, we together surely can do no less.